The biggest thing is I was a fan first. I'm a fan of the sport on every single level, from the novice 64 kilo women all the way to open men. Like, I just like watching the sport. I like watching people do cool stuff. That's what Strongman is, people doing cool stuff. A lot of people don't understand water cuts and understand the dangers, the risks, and how to do it properly. And each specific weight class and each gender has a specific difference. There's gonna be a day I do my last Strongman show, and I know that. I would love for that to be what I segue into. So I'm trying to hopefully, at this point in time in what I'm doing in my career with it right now, I'm setting myself up that as the sport grows, I can grow with it, and I could be one of the voices that you hear for the next generation of athletes.
Do I really have to do cardio?
No.
How do I know if I'm overtraining?
Ready?
Should I cut weight in this competition?
How much protein am I supposed to always?
Is it ironic that a podcast about Strongman is hosted by a woman?
I think that's kind of the point.
This week's episode was brought to you by Strongman Institute and our newest sponsor, Strong IV. Strong IV is a nurse-led, athlete-focused hydration company with one goal: help every athlete compete at their best. Now, whether it's learning how to manage electrolytes during training cycles, getting strength back after a weight cut, which I have personally done, or giving your body the tools it needs to recover quickly between events. Recovery doesn't need to be complicated, but it should be consistent. Thank you, Strong IV, for your support. Everyone, highly recommend checking them out on Instagram. They have not only great tips on how to manage your hydration, but you can also see where they're going to be next. And if you're lucky, it'll be at your next competition. Welcome back to Lift and Load. Strongman is a sport that is growing and evolving every day, and it's so much more than the sum of its parts. One athlete who understands this is Krause. A nutrition coach and an advocate for both athletes and the sport, he is someone who understands more than anyone that your output is determined by your input. This week we cover CJ's decade-long journey into Strongman, where it's heading, and where we can be better. So get ready, because it's time to lock in, lift heavy, load up. We're talking with the Giant Slayer himself.
Well, hi. How's it going?
Hey, it's going good. How you doing?
Thanks for coming out here and just being able to talk about all things Strongman, all things nutrition. And for those of you who are just joining us and starting to listen to this, CJ, you actually came recommended to me through another. Now we've had her as a guest on the show. So Kate Hickman was like, you got to have this guy. He's incredible. Huge advocate for athletes. He also does nutrition. And I was like, all right, like we've got to get him. Then I look at who you are and I was like, oh shit, I think I was just at Worlds with this dude. Were you a 105? What class did you compete in? Or 90?
I'm a 90. I'm a 90.
So we were actually competing at very similar times, and they kind of paired, I'd say, like the mid weights, and then they had the light weights, so the 64 kilo women, 80 kg men, and then it was a 73 and 90 for women and men, and etc. But tell me a little bit, more about you. Like, how did you get into Strongman? I know you've created a really cool niche for yourself within the space, and so give me the rundown.
I mean, I kind of fell into Strongman, honestly. I was living in Florida at the time, where I'm from, and I was working at a nutrition store, and we were doing a booth at the gym, and I saw some people behind this area doing like yoke runs, and I was like, what is this? And I was confused, and I did a couple things, and I'm like, oh, this is fun. And they're like, you're pretty good at this. So like 6 months later, I do my first show, 0 my first event, because I don't know what a circus dumbbell is. But I do pretty well on some things, and then I get a little bit better, and that's kind of how I started. Just kind of got the itch for it. And I kind of started being Strongman, 10 years ago now? I think I literally just thought about this the other day. August this year will be 10 years from my first novice win. So that's a crazy thought to me. So people think I'm younger than I am. I'm doing this not as long, but I kind of had like the long road. I was not a freak at this sport. I kind of just I didn't give up kind of thing. Probably, I was 28 when I finally got good at it, in my opinion. That's when I got third at Nationals for Strongman Corp. And then I broke the American deadlift record twice for the 80 kilo class. And then this back when I was in 80.
Nice.
And then went to OSG, finaled my first year. And that's when the snowball started rolling, right? I kind of just barely missed the finals of the Arnold twice, things like that. And recently, my biggest accolade, I would say, is I won the Chaos Classic this year, the heaviest 90 kilo show in history. So that's probably my top level. And then, yeah, podium to Pro Strongman League. So I've got a good amount of accolades. Made the finals of Shaw Classic as a 105, even though I wasn't near 105. Things like that. So I've done a lot of like great things in sport. And the sport has done a lot for me and like personally and just like a lot of my mental state and things like that. So I like to do everything I can to give back to it, help people, things like that.
And that's actually what I heard a lot of about you is that, you know, you were, first off, congrats on all that, because that's just really cool. But from a purely altruistic perspective, it's really easy for athletes to, I think, kind of put heads down, go, lift, compete, bounce, that's it. But a lot of things that comes around, like kind of you and who you are as a person, is you've always been pushing the sport to be better. You've always been pushing, you know, promoters to be better. And so whenever you are involved, it seems like good things seem to follow for athletes, just because you're not afraid to be vocal about what matters, right? You know, strongman is still an evolving sport. It is something that is becoming more and more mainstream. It's becoming more and more commercial, and it takes people saying, hey, this is what's good, this is what's bad, etc. And how did you find yourself in that position? How did you like say, you know what, I'm going to make sure that everyone knows that I'm the guy that just gives a damn?
I mean, it's not even that. I'm just very outspoken and I'm very passionate. I'll compare it to when I first went for the American deadlift record for the 80s. A lot of people were talking how they wanted to do it. No one actually put the effort in, but they didn't want to go to these shows and do it. So I just flew across the country and did it. So I knew I could, kind of thing. And I take that same mindset in pushing the sport forward, because I don't mind being the target on my back. If like I, piss off like someone higher up or things like that, because I want something to be better. Ideally, I try to have conversations privately, but anytime I do go public, typically I've tried other ways to do it as well behind the scenes. And a lot of stuff I work on is like just trying to push the sport forward on that. So I'm very much known to be outspoken at this point. And again, I just think this sport again has done so much for me. At personal levels, emotional levels, mental levels, it's helped me out so much in a bunch of different ways. That I want to see it keep growing, give someone else an opportunity for that. And I want to see with it growing, the athletes that put their bodies on the line get something for it. Like my biggest thing I say is I don't want to, I know I'll never get rich in this sport. I don't want to go broke doing it. Those are the two things I kind of focus on. So, but as it gets more mainstream, someone is making money on this. Someone uses our likeness. We need to be smart in the fact of, if you're going to do something, we should get some kind of compensation, or at least understand where it's all going. I think we deserve that. And so I'm not afraid to like ask those hard questions, which again gets me in trouble sometimes.
Yeah, someone's got to do it. I appreciate you. But I'm glad you bring that up in compensation in the sport, because as a whole, and I'll talk about at least the American sports system, because overseas, I think they do a pretty good job at it for a lot of sports that America doesn't. In the US, if you are not football, baseball, basketball, you tend to not make a lot of money. I mean, my background in the MMA world, fighters were always like, there was always tons of issues with that. They were more outspoken about it. You look at the more niche sports, athletes are kind of putting themselves more or less on the line in order to bring entertainment, right? At the end of the day, that really is what this is. The competition, the sport, the athleticism is all a huge aspect of it. But promoters of shows are trying to draw a crowd. What's your thoughts on where strongman can go? Like, is this a kind of sport where you think people can make money, or is it this, like, do you think we're peaked where we're at?
I don't think we're peaked where we're at. We've seen it actually at a higher point before in the past. Like, we have been on ESPN. We were on, like, I was on the deadlift show at 7 p.m. on a Friday night on ESPN. Like, that was me. So, like, we've been to that pinnacle before, but we as athletes, it's both sides. Right? It's promoters and athletes need to do things to help us out, because as promoters, they need to set us up for success and promote us successfully, and pick and choose. And athletes need to put themselves in positions to be a spectacle, to be promoted to an extent, and be that, not just, again, hide in the shadows and train. You need to be posting, be showing yourself, promote yourself to sponsors, find why you're marketable. It's similar to how these other sports have kind of grown. Like, we've seen sports like CrossFit and High Rocks are coming in now and things like that. And there's real money to be made there. And we're just as niche as that, in my opinion. It just takes the right combination of both the promoters and the athletes to do their parts together. And I feel like that's the only downside strongman has right now, is that they're not, at least in America, like we said, they're not combining properly, and like they're almost fighting each other at this point. And that's kind of like, I try to bridge the gap that way, is the way I try to look at it. Because again, we've been to that pinnacle. Like the 105 Clash from the Coast was on ESPN. The Record Breaker show the day before was on ESPN. That's a Friday and Saturday ESPN show. So there was interest at one point, and somebody along the line across the entire sport fumbled the bag. Doesn't mean we can't get back there. Like I've been on Rogue at the Arnold before, and somehow that gets fumbled. These opportunities have been there, and I think they can get back to that, but it takes the right combination of promoter work and athletes to promote as well. And there's some middle ground where we all can benefit from this.
100%. And that, I'm glad you bring up that, even like the emerging sport like High Rocks and whatnot, because High Rocks is essentially a more adaptable and scalable form of CrossFit, is kind of what we've been seeing over time. And it's an even newer sport, but it's selling out. Like if you look at their website, they have these huge convention style things that are already selling out and making a ton of money. And that can go back on the athlete side.
Now, the biggest thing about strongman, we can do that. We can scale it. We can find levels. You can find regional. You can find promotions. There's so many different ways to utilize that same. The strongman's been along for so long, but I think it takes that mindset. Like High Rocks is very new as well, but I think part of that, it's very beneficial that it's new, because there isn't those like old mindsets. Like we've always done it this way. We need to have a piece of like the history and piece of like this worked, but take out the stuff that didn't work. How to push forward with the sport. Because this sport needs to get out of parking lots, and it can for sure. But a lot of people don't know that they could get into it at lower levels. And I think that's what happens with a lot of athletes that, we talk about in America. There's NFL, there's 99% of athletes will never make that. But they're good enough to be a top level in something else. And this could be that something else. And you get those people to kind of like realize it exists at the right age. And you can see that skyrocket and grow. But again, it takes that promotion, because like I said, High Rocks is the biggest example right now, because they are the ones that are brand new doing all that. And I think strongman can do that.
And arguably should. I mean, it's got, from a pure entertainment aspect and a pure like novice athlete, it's so accessible. Like it's like, hey, there's a rock, go pick it up. Like we can go train with this. From a purely implementation, it's funny. I was talking with Bobby Thompson the other week, and he said how strongman is, in his opinion, almost like one of the last true like intramural sports that America has at an adult, because you can be a regular dude working a 9 to 5 Monday through Friday, and there's a local comp that has a novice or whatever it is. You can go compete, you can come back home, and like it's your outlet, right? And so strongman can reach people on all the different levels. So it's actually, I'm just wanted to segue myself really quick, because you yourself, when it comes to your career within strongman, you're involved in competitions wise and more than just an athlete. And that's something that I think is actually pretty cool from a highlighting perspective, is you not only work on as an athlete, I'll say work, right? It's all work for us. But you do commentating, and you're involved in almost not on, I wouldn't say the promotion side, but kind of that connecting piece between the audience and then the athlete and what's going on stage. So how did that happen for you? And how do you feel you fill a very specific role on continuing to bridge the gap as that voice?
I mean, the biggest thing is I was a fan first. I'm a fan of the sport on every single level, from the novice 64 kilo women all the way to open men. Like I just like watching the sport. I like watching people do cool stuff. That's what strongman is, people doing cool stuff. I work as a coach. I do group fitness. I do personal training. I do all the aspects. I know how to talk, right? So I basically was like, hey, you're doing a live stream. Do you need a commentary team? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, do you think you'd let me do it? I want to give myself an opportunity. And they're like, okay, we'll give you a shot. That's really all it was. And I commentated the first U64 women's show for Pro Strongman League. And I got a lot of great feedback, and I got a lot better at it, because I've been around the sport for a long time. And like I said, one of those things, and my passion for every weight class and everything, just being a fan of the sport, kind of helped put me in that situation. And I think because I'm such a fan, because like I care so much about promoting the athletes, I looked up every athlete and looked up their stats, and I could talk about like random stuff about them and I know from being a sports fan of other sports as well, what commentary should be. Because I think it's sometimes it's a problem with some of the commentary work. You get these athletes that are, again, athletes first, so they talk about themselves versus pushing the sport forward. And there's nothing wrong with pushing yourself forward. There's nothing wrong with being an advocate for yourself. but it depends what platform you have and what you're working with. So I always think of it that way. And then I slowly just started doing more gigs. And again, people liked what I did, and liked what I talk about, and like how I present the athletes that are competing. And it kind of fell through there. And then because of that, I work with a lot of different promotions. I do it primarily the Pro Strongman League. I've become their lead commentator in all their shows that I'm not competing at. But I also have done different Strongman Corporation shows. I've done local shows for USS as well, like in different states. So I think a big piece of that is I see the behind the scenes now too, and I see how promoters work and things like that. I can be that voice, how to make that part of it. I think production quality is a huge step forward we need to focus on. So if you ever hire me for a show to be commentary, I'm not just going to sit there and just talk. I'm going to make sure the camera angles are correct. I'm going to jump behind and like talk to the guy that's running the camera. Like, hey, we need this, we need that. I need stat sheets, I need this. Because I think it needs to have that professionalism to grow as well on all avenues.
And that's how, I mean, take a look at the ESPNs. They're not going to take a look at any sport that doesn't have some kind of grab factor, right? That has some kind of high quality. The backyard videos only go so far. You know, people want to watch something good, and our expectations are through the roof when someone can record a damn good video on an iPhone these days. And so if they could do it on their phones in their pocket, let's make sure that the show looks good. So I love that. That's awesome. How often do you do that? Is that something that you see yourself keep doing? I know you say you have your coaching gig as well. Do you think that's an avenue for you, or is it just kind of another just way that you're giving back to something that you love?
I would love, there's going to be a day I do my last Strongman show, and I know that. I would love for that to be what I segue into. So I'm trying to hopefully, at this point in time and what I'm doing in my career with it right now, I'm setting myself up that as the sport grows, I can grow with it. That's where I would hopefully I'm setting myself up with. Because I know, again, nutrition is also a big part of it. I want to be a part of that. And I can go over that when we start talking to it, because I've got some fun stories with that. But those are like the two avenues I think I want to be still involved with Strongman, because it is my favorite thing. But I know eventually I'm not going to be an athlete, and I need to have that. And if I want to have that drive and lead the sport better than how I found it, that's when I have to be that person.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And I'm glad you bring up the nutrition side, because as much as we'd love to be athletes forever, we all can't be, right? And so there's a retiring point for everyone, no matter what you do. So being able to give back and work with people on a purely professional side and still be able to be involved in some capacity is cool. And that actually takes me to something that I almost had like 2 chapters I wanted to talk to you about, because like there's one entity that is CJ, and that is like the athlete advocate. And I wanted to give you some space to talk about that, because I think it's so important and it's so cool. And then there's a whole other side where you're just a beast with nutrition. And I wanted to take the opportunity for some of our listeners, where we've talked on general nutrition on this show before, that was very important, because general nutrition for the population is just crucial. I'd love to pick your brain on athlete nutrition. So first off, where do you operate within the nutrition space? Are you a coach? Do you have your own business? Like, how does that work? And then if you could talk to me a little about how you approach athletes that might want to get to the next level nutrition wise, but don't really know what to do for the highly competitive type.
Yeah. So I do have my own business, the GSK Nutrition. So there's a website, gsknutrition.com, and you can kind of see a lot of the athletes I've worked with. And because I've worked with athletes that have won OSG, I've worked with athletes at podium OSG, I've worked with athletes all the way down to like they're doing early levels of trying to get to nationals, like the whole spectrum of it all. I primarily focus on the weight class athletes, because I think a lot of their nutrition is misconstrued. There's a lot of misconceptions out there. Being as I was an 80 kilo athlete for most of my career, and I probably stayed an 80 kilo athlete probably 2 to 3 years too long, not letting my body grow. I want to give someone else an opportunity to know when those lines need to be. A big problem that we had, and that's what kind of we saw whenever we had some unfortunate things happen in the sport, was a lot of people don't understand water cuts and understand the dangers, the risks, and how to do it properly. And each specific weight class and each gender has a specific difference, very key differences that you have to accommodate for. So a lot of like even coaches that coach water cuts will coach how they do it. And you could be coaching, like you're a 105 man and you're coaching a 64 woman, you can't treat them the same way. So that's kind of where I kind of came. I saw that problem happening in the sport. And another friend of mine started doing very similar with his business as well. So we both kind of took on that separately, but we work almost like side by side in a way because we can't take on all of it. So we help each other out. Shout out to Ross for that, Ross Millard. He's also a great nutrition coach. Does a lot of great water cuts, things like that.
Nice. Do you tend to work, or what do you prefer, I guess is the question. Do you prefer to work with more long-term nutrition plans, like they're on, whether it be weight loss, performance, et cetera, or do you really like working with an athlete to say, okay, now this is how you water cut? Because those are they're related but separate, right?
I prefer to work with athletes longer, personally, because I can really dial in their cuts. I can send an athlete a water cut. You give me like a month's notice, I can prep it for you because I don't know your trends. I don't know how your body reacts. So I prefer to work with people for minimum 3 months before we do a water cut, but that just doesn't happen as often. And I'll tell people no. That's the thing as well. Like I'll tell people like, oh, I got to lose 20 pounds and to make weight. And I'm like, have you ever done that before? What's your weight right now? What's your body fat? And they're like, no. And I'm like, well, I advise not doing it. And I had no problem doing that. So
Let's not do that. Yeah, it sounds terrible.
yeah.
Yeah.
But they see people doing all, and that's the problem. With this sport, because, and you see it in fighting too, with MMA and things like that, especially at the amateur level. They just like, oh, this athlete made, and they won the championship. I'm like, well, they've done it a million times, and they probably shouldn't be doing it, but they have to because they're trying to get paycheck and things like that. So, I mean, I would prefer to work with someone long term. I've had a couple of athletes I've worked with for multiple years. And I know like their blood sugar levels. I know when to feed them, when to pull them back, knowing their pacing, knowing exactly how to water cut them versus I will always take on clients that want and need the help for those cuts, preference wise, long term. But I'm never opposed. Like my biggest time of the year is right around OSG and nationals. I get the most inquiries because everyone wants to make weight and do well. Those are two things that people don't realize are actually working together, not against each other. They're not separate entities. To make weight is actually really easy. To make weight and do well is actually very hard.
Yes, because you're depleted, you're dehydrated. There's a million things. And that's one thing I wanted to ask your opinion on. Depleting yourself is one thing. Really, the game is, can you recharge, reload, refuel fast enough to be at a performance level again? So when you take a look at your athletes you work with, you've got them through, let's say you talked them through, the month prior, 3 months prior, you got them to the point, they did the water cut successfully. How do you help them refuel? Like, do you have any tips, hacks, without giving away trade secrets, that just work really well? Like, how do you take a look at that?
I mean, they have an exact protocol. Each athlete responds different, so they know exactly like when to have their first meal. A lot of times athletes' biggest problem is they eat right away. Their stomach acids are all messed up. And it's going to hit them. It's going to start giving indigestion, start bloating them, and they're not going to be able to fuel themselves for the training, for the show the next day. So the biggest thing I say to people is within that first half an hour of making, especially if you've had to cut over 5% of your body weight. Let's just use that as a baseline right now. Your stomach acids need time to build. So you need to have easily digestible carbohydrates. We typically stick to rice cakes and like some kind of jam or honey as like that first like bite of food to like get that going. It's not going to be your favorite thing in the world. It's not going to be like, oh my God, I feel so good at this. It's going to be like, you need to get the acids churning on that one. And I think that's where a lot of athletes make their biggest thing. You don't want to chug water either, because you don't want to waste space in there. Because again, it's going to start bloating really fast because you've probably didn't have water for anywhere from 12 to 24 hours. So you're not going to just instantly like chug that whole Pedialyte. It's going to work great. Your body needs time to reassess what just happened. And that's just an easy one just for athletes to start their process is don't rush into the refeed. Give it that like 30 minutes to an hour and then have that first meal. Don't venture too far out of your norm to refeed. Weight is not always a good thing to put on. Bring yourself back to your training weight is the most important part.
So with that being said, do you have any parameters that you recommend? You mentioned like 5% cut as a baseline, for example. Everyone and their mother goes, you can lose 10% of your body weight in water. And that's like a number that has perpetuated the industry for a long time. And I think it's very true for some people, not very true for most. I myself can cut about 10% of my body weight and I'm going to do it and feel like dog shit. And so that's probably not great for me, right? I'd love somewhere more to the 5% for a cut. Do you have any like brackets of percentages that you recommend for people off the gate, or that you tell them, hey, this is a really bad idea based on X, Y, and Z? Or do you really just take it kind of on a case-by-case basis?
It's case by case, but I tell people they earned their ability to go to that next percent with proper data. So typically I try to keep athletes 5% or less in their first few cuts of the doing it. I also notify athletes, if you're doing this, trying to get to the next level, whether it be nationals, whether it be something else, and it better be something you can get to, or you can keep competing and get better. You're trying to break a record. You're trying to do all these little things that you need to get better at, right? You have to take those risks for it. And then you earn each percent up, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I've done up to 12% to myself. I will never advise a single human being to do that.
That sounds terrible.
I know. That was my last cut was about 12.2%. My last 80 kilo cut, I should say, before I moved up to the 90s. So I've lived through that, and I performed fine, but I got injured, and it ups your injury risk immensely on that. Like I still performed, I did great that show, but I came out of that show in way worse shape. I had to do about 3 to 4 months of rehab for my knee because there's just not enough. You can't get enough fluid back in your body quick enough to not risk injuries. And these are things that athletes don't consider. They're like, oh, I can, so I should. No. You have to understand the risk factors of each percent you add on increases your injury risk, increases your ability to bounce back if you've never done it before, understanding what it takes to get there, the mental aspect of it, to keep going back into whatever avenue of choice you do to sweat on that one, because realistically, once you break that 5 to 6% line, you're going to have to find some time to sweat. Like typically 4% or less, I can get it out of your system. Easy peasy, just do a water load and drop and manipulation, sodium, manipulation of carbs on the person. 95% of the time, I can have that out of your system in that 4 to 5% range. After that, it kind of becomes how much basic torture you can do to yourself to get the sweat out of you. And there's tricks you can do, but it's understanding all these different realistic things that have to happen to get to that scale. And then once you get to the scale, you need to know how to get back to your weight. So like CJ did 12% and he made the finals of OSG. Okay, well, yes, but it was also the last time I did an 80 show. I realized I could never do that a second time, and I came out injured.
Right.
Those are all factors I decided to take those risks on. So people see the good results, not the bad results, and it was just like, and it was hard. It was very hard, and it's not fun. I've had cuts to where I couldn't eat solid food for almost a week because my stomach acids were so shot. And I performed great. I made podium at that show at a professional 80 kilo show, but I physically couldn't eat solid food for 4 more days after the show. These are things I don't advise, but I was trying to earn a paycheck, which is one thing, and we don't have a lot of those opportunities in the sport. And I was trying to set myself up to potentially break a record. So these are just the risks you take, and those are things I try to explain to my athletes. They need to know it's never going to not be a risk. It's educated risks, and you do it safe as possible, but there's always something that could shift, and that's why it's important to have a coach if you're going for those higher percent cuts, because they can tell you when it's time to keep going or when it's time to actually stop. Of athletes that I've worked with for long term or even for cuts where they start with me, I've never had to tell an athlete to stop their cut, which is I've never had an athlete miss weight that I've worked with for more than a month. I've had 2 athletes contact me within 72 hours of a competition, and I told them there's a shot that this could work.
Oof, that'd be hard.
And I cut them off in time. I told them, I'm like, what is your pacing? What is this? I didn't work. These are athletes, like it happened this last year at OSG. I had an athlete contact me probably 36 hours before weigh-in, well overweight to be where he needed to be. And he's like, what do I need to do to make weight? And I'm like, here's what you can do. Is it going to work? I'll know in like 4 hours based on how you're pacing. And you need to understand that I will tell you to stop if it's not going to work, because I'm not going to see you hurt yourself. And again, this wasn't one of my athletes. It's just somebody that just like knows what I do and contacted me, and I had to tell him to stop. So it's having someone that knows when that line is too, as well.
No, I love that. Have you ever seen on the peripheral, since it was one of your athletes, have you seen it gone just real south? Like, what have you seen? Because in that space, I feel like everybody talks, right? And so Have you seen ones where you're like, oh, that was maybe an athlete didn't perform well and you could tell it was because of their cut? Maybe they had done really well in training before. Or do you think it's just if you're not going to make weight, they just kind of call it and go home and they don't make it to that stage?
I've seen athletes push themselves to make weight and then underperform by immense measures on that one because, again, a lot of it, in all honesty, is an athlete. Again, making weight is easy. It's just how much you can endure torture. That's really the whole idea of it. Like you can keep pushing the body and you can get your body to that scale, but unless you set yourself up on the way there, you're not going to bounce back. You're not going to perform. So I've seen all spectrums on that one. The problem is a lot of coaches don't have that ability to be like, you're done, and just cut them off. Because athletes in that state especially will keep going most of the time, especially if they're like, they want to be tough enough. They want to perform. They've worked for months just to step on that stage. And it's hard. And like I said, I've had to make that call for myself with my coach in the past. Like I've had to make that deal when I was cutting to 80s. It happened one major time and it was a tough call, but it was the right call because I wasn't going to make weight. It was just going to be impossible. So I've been on that side too. And as an athlete, you feel like you let everyone down. You feel embarrassed. You feel this and that. But if that ever does happen to you, realistically, you can fix the process. And realistically, it's probably because your body fat wasn't low enough to shed the water. So, and you just go back in the lab and you set your body up a little better. You make a decision of whether you're going to go up a class or you're going to try to become leaner to make it possible. Doesn't mean it's going to be easy on the cut, but those are things that you have to consider. But I've seen every spectrum of people that have to cut it off, didn't cut it off and should have and underperformed, all the people to have ended up really hurting themselves. And that last one is the reason why I started doing what I do, because I saw that happening more often. Because again, this is a very finite situation. And especially if you're not working within your own weight class, you've never been like studied this, it's really easy to give the wrong protocols to the wrong people.
So when you take a look at, so we're at the beginning right now at 2025, like how does your roster look this year? Are you stacked with athletes? Are you going to be competing more? How does that look for you for continuing down this path of helping people, but also being an athlete yourself?
I've actually decided to pull back a little bit of competing. I'm doing about 3 to 4 competitions this year. Last year I did upwards of like 11 or 12 because I was working on some goals in mind. Like I'm going to be doing only a bunch of the major ones that I feel value the athletes and are the right ones for me. I have a good source of athletes. I have one athlete right now. He's going to be competing next weekend in his first international show.
Nice.
And he's going to be attempting the 105 world records for deadlift. On a side note, I do not give advice on that. If anyone's interested in advice on that, I will not tell you how to run your decision to run a cycle if you do. I will listen to you to hear what you're doing, and I will make nutrition around it, but that's not something that I typically do. Just want to throw that out there. Anyone's interested in that, I'm not the person for that. But I do take on athletes that are enhanced. I take on athletes that are natural. And again, it just depends how I need to approach it. And I have athletes that come in and out. Like when they're in off season, they kind of don't really feel like they want it, and that's okay. And they come back right when they hit season, I'll do the rest of the year with them. So right now, my roster isn't too, I have room for athletes to come on. I'm not picky, but whoever I want to work with, I like to work with longer. But if someone has a show coming up, they're like, hey, I want to focus on this, and this, I'd love to work with you for a couple months, things like that. But for myself, my next show is going to be Connecticut Strongest Man. It's going to be a pro-am for the 90 kilo class because I want just to get my Strongman Core Pro Carb as 90. But my main focus will be going back to England and trying to go back-to-back winning the Chaos Classic. So
that's Chaos is such a cool comp to be. I got to get over there and do it. We actually had Rhiannon Lovelace on here in an earlier episode, and she was so much fun to talk to about what she sees Chaos growing into. We actually had the OG Chaos on the show, which they do a really good job at taking care of athletes too. So that kind of makes me even go back to the internationally. You know, people are pushing boundaries. They're trying to make the sport better. They're trying to get athletes like yourself to come over and compete and just lift some heavy shit and break some records, and it's going well. So and we will put, by the way, I will make sure I have that. Anyone interested in contacting CJ, just check out our bio, check out our descriptions below, and then we're going to make sure we have, your coaching business, your profile, etc., so people can find you.
Yeah, appreciate that.
Well, with that, man, I appreciate you so much for coming on here. I think nutrition is something that is incredibly important. I think, athlete advocacy is incredibly important. And when you can put it together, already thinking about how do we keep growing and connecting and making both the sport as a profession and also our athletes as ourselves better, it's people like you doing it. So it really meant a lot that you came on here and talked a little about that today.
No, I appreciate you having me on. It was a blast. I mean, I love any way I can talk about this sport, any way we can kind of help grow it more. And it takes shows like this as well to make sure that all voices are being heard inside the sport, just because there's so many different avenues and we get so fixated on our weight class that there's like athletes across every weight class doing really cool stuff. So I appreciate you taking the time and having me on.
Thank you so much for listening this week, guys. CJ was awesome to talk to, and we can't wait to have him back. Since recording this episode, CJ has taken his strongman career even further, winning his Strongman Corporation Pro card after an outstanding victory at the CT SummerSlam, setting the bar even higher for athletes everywhere. The Chaos Classic is no longer being held for 2025, so we, like the rest of you, are going to be waiting on the edge of our seats to see what greatness is in store next for the Giant Slayer.